Hello, welcome. You're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 36 for February 3rd, 2023. My name is Justin Young, and joining me as always are OJ Duncan and Alicia Utecht, and special guest Mario Sanders for the second week in a row.
Woo!
This is becoming a pattern.
A pattern?
A pattern. It's one done by Paddington Bear himself. Oh, Paddington is such a good movie.
It is. It had no right being that good, but it is so good.
And the second one is so much better, and you can't believe it. You're sitting there watching, you're going, I can't believe this is so much of a better movie. Fantastic. If you haven't seen Paddington 2, go watch it immediately. There's your command.
Come back to the podcast after you finish it and send your thoughts to justin.young@siu.edu.
Please pause the podcast, go watch Paddington 2, then email me your thoughts. How's everyone doing?
I'm on 4 hours of sleep, so, that's great.
4 hours of sleep? What are you doing?
I got caught up grading and lesson planning and lost track of time until 2 a.m. And then I stayed up for another hour reading.
Was it one of those situations, because I do this, where I'm working and then I get ready to go to bed and I'm like, I have to come down from working. I need something to relax.
That's what the reading was.
Yeah.
The lesson planning was I was grading something for my students that I wanted to get back to them today so they could start on the next assignment. Mm-hmm. And I got done with that at about 11:30 p.m. And I was like, oh, well, I'm already on my computer, so why don't I just type up my notes for class? And then I looked back at what I did for this class last semester, and I was like, I don't like what I did last semester. What should I do instead? And then I ended up doing one of my favorite activities, but so I got caught up and excited and spent 2 hours lesson planning it.
Well, there are worse things to hear about your teacher than that they got caught up and excited about lesson planning.
I'm just glad the activity went well today, because I was really like, well, this could. I've seen it go really well, and I've seen it bomb. So I was like, please be good, and it was. So I'm happy.
It's always interesting when you have that assignment that the first time you do it, it just goes spectacular, and you're like, man, this is great. I'm going to do this every time I teach this class, and then the next time it completely bombs, and you're like, what did I do different? What's wrong?
Seriously.
So I've never quite figured out, is it the students? Is it the way, did I do it slightly different? Because you feel like you're doing it exactly the same, but who knows? Probably a combination of factors in there. Mario, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Classes are going good. We did first speeches finished up today, and I was pretty happy with them. I think they went a lot better than first speeches last semester. I think part of that is I taught it better, or, spent more time, seeing, okay, where did I not do well last semester? And I think spending more time emphasizing specific things, I think that's why they went better, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, that's always a great feeling when you feel like you directly contributed to things getting better.
Yeah.
And we should note that Mario is wearing his Kirby shirt today, apparently sucking up to Alicia, which, sucking up Kirby.
Actually, when she first saw it earlier today, she was like, hey, nice shirt, Mario. So it's the first thing she noticed.
She didn't try to steal it from you or anything?
No. Thankfully.
Yet.
Yes.
She's going to be waiting for you in the parking lot afterwards.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say I did recently get a Kirby keychain and all of that, so I have my fix of Kirby materials for now.
But now you need the matching t-shirt.
I do have a Kirby hat that I don't think I've worn yet, so that's the one I might have to really worry about.
I'll say that's the one you're going to have to guard.
It's
a lot easier to steal a hat than a shirt.
Does it look like Kirby's head on yours, or is it just a regular baseball cap?
It's just sort of a, that dad style hat with the, the snapback. Uh-huh. And it's just got the sleepy Kirby on it.
Best Kirby. All Kirby is best Kirby, but
Well, according to Smash Brothers Ultimate, he is the ultimate Nintendo character.
Darn right he is.
The only one that doesn't die.
Yep. It all comes down to our little puffball.
Now, that might have to do with Smash Brothers Ultimate was made by Kirby's creator. he might be slightly biased there.
Just a little. He needs to take care of his son.
Well, Miyamoto does call Mario his son. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
OJ, how have you been?
I've been pretty good. It's been a beginning week. It's very cold out and very icy. So that's been a little bit of a drag. Otherwise, I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like my normal walk home, which is maybe like 15 minutes, takes at least 2 or 3 times that.
Yeah.
Because it's just a solid sheet of ice, and I'm figuring out how can I get home without dying.
Yeah.
You just penguin waddle.
Well, and mostly walking through people's yards works a little better.
I cannot believe, I admit, as a Minnesotan, I kind of judged when they were like, we're shutting the university down. I was like, come on, y'all. This is not that bad.
No, I do too. When I was in high school, the one time that they closed my high school because of winter weather is that the news said if you go outside and you have any skin exposed, you will lose it.
Yeah.
You will die. It was like 40 below.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, we'll do a late start today. That's the only time any winter weather, and that was right on the cusp of Wisconsin. So I'm sure you got even worse in Minnesota.
Oh yeah, we closed when we were literally colder than Mars.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or if it was so cold that they couldn't get the buses running. That was the way that we got more than a single day to a 2-hour late start.
In Western Kentucky, we would close if there was the threat of snow.
Yeah, the first year when I moved down here to Southern Illinois, they closed the school because there was like a half an inch of snow forecasted, and I was like, really?
Yeah.
No,
that day that we did, was it last week that they were like, oh, school is closed until noon or until 10 a.m. or whatever. I stepped outside. I recently moved, and I stepped outside because I'd seen my neighbor, and I was like, oh, she's a little older, probably in her 60s. So, and I'm young. I'm from Minnesota. I know how to deal with this. So I'll go ahead and just shovel and take care of it. And I opened up the door, and she was already out there shoveling, found out she's also from Minnesota and can totally handle the cold. And that was the greatest bonding, was just bonding over how, I think if you talk to a Southerner, they're like, Carbondale is not the South. Carbondale's the North. But as a Northerner, I'm like, Carbondale is the South. Because they don't know how to deal with anything.
So growing up in Kentucky, I always talked about myself as a Southerner until I moved to Mississippi and lived there. And then I will never refer to Kentucky as the South again. And then, here is not at all the North or the South, because if you go up to, I used to live on the border of Michigan, and that's the North. As I was telling India the other day, it starts snowing in November and you don't see the ground until April.
Yeah.
And so I feel like we're in that in-between zone where we don't really belong anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what to do with myself if there's not a blizzard in April.
I have never had class or school canceled because of weather before, so it was. I've had classes canceled for other reasons, but not for weather,
like Godzilla and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Earthquakes.
I'm sure if there was a big earthquake, that would be weather related. There was a, I don't know. This is not necessarily podcast material, but we had a shooting at our school when I was a junior, and it was a drive-by gang shooting, and so it was very chaotic for the rest of that school day, and so parents, I think, picked kids up, and the school just said, yeah, we're just going to send everybody home, and so
that was probably a wise choice.
Probably,
yeah, that seems smart.
Yeah,
let's get all these kids out of here. That's much more serious than Godzilla.
Godzilla's got a song, though.
Well, and
you get Godzilla's theme song when Godzilla attacks.
I haven't seen the new Godzillas, but isn't Godzilla working with the U.S. government now?
Godzilla's a narc.
AKAB includes Godzilla.
Oh my gosh.
All kaiju are bastards.
Oh my gosh. Ryan's going to be so sad that they missed that.
That's right. This is all like tailored for Ryan.
Yeah.
We always have the discussions people want to have when they're not here. I feel like we had a big Sonic discussion last time Alicia was missing.
You did, and I had thoughts, and we shared them.
All right. Well, let's move on to what you've been playing. Alicia, what have you been playing?
I have not been playing a lot this week. It has been a very busy week in terms of trying to get unpacking done. I can't remember if I've mentioned on the podcast or not, but I'm going to be getting a cat very soon. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm getting him next weekend. And so I'm like trying to get all my unpacking done and get everything put away before he gets here.
Oh, but he'll like the boxes.
Oh, I'm keeping the boxes for him. I just want to have everything out of the boxes. That way when he climbs into them, he's not messing up my stuff.
Oh, he'll unpack it for you.
So it's been a pretty busy week. I played a little bit of Pokemon Violet, just, hanging out and doing raids, I did the Greninja raid, so I have that now. But most of my gaming has been either like playing Pokemon Cafe Remix on my phone or hanging out in Twitch streams while people are playing stuff. Lots of Animal Crossing, some New Horizons, some original GameCube. And one of my friends recently started a 3-heart run of Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. And also, he played it originally on the Wii, which they mirrored it for the Wii because they wanted you to have the sword and assumed most people would be right-handed. Well, now he's emulating it for GameCube, so everything is mirrored for him. And it's a 3-heart challenge. And he keeps running off the bridge. So that's been very entertaining to hang out in those streams and be part of, because that's one of those games I never actually played. I've never actually played a Zelda game in my life, which I don't know how I haven't.
All right, so we got OJ playing Sonic 06, and we'll find maybe the CDI games. We'll
I feel like we need to correct this for you.
If someone can get me a Legend of Zelda game I can play on the PlayStation 2 or on my Switch without spending an obscene amount of money, I would love to play one. But I've never actually played a Zelda game. I've watched walkthroughs of a bunch of them, but I've never actually played one. But Twilight Princess was one of the ones, when it came out, I was like, oh my gosh, I want this, but it's $50 and I can't afford that.
Right.
So it's been very fun hanging out and just experiencing it, even if I'm not getting to play it myself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Pokemon Violet, you did say you beat it, right? So you're doing post-game content now?
I've beaten post-game. I'm just kind of vibing now, trying to... I've never been a shiny hunter. Like, I've never gotten a shiny Pokemon in the mainline games. Only in Pokemon Go. But, what a bunch of people on Twitch do when they're playing Pokemon post-game. They're shiny hunting. Yeah. And I've just seen so many people just come across random shinies in Gen 9 that I'm like, how have I not yet? So I'm not like super making a point to shiny hunt, but I'm kind of running around. They have outbreaks where you're more likely to find shinies, and if you get specific ingredients for the picnic sandwiches, it increases your shiny odds. Haven't really messed with that. And then like there's Masuda method breeding where if you trade to get a Ditto that has its origin in a different continent, then that somehow increases your shiny odds. I don't really understand how. That involves math, and math is a 4-letter word, and my mom told me to stay away from those. But I'm like, well, it'd be kind of neat if I could catch a shiny. So I just kind of run around and see what raids are going on, and if my friends are streaming, then I might pull out mine and join in raids that people are doing there. But yeah, I've beaten everything. I assume that there will be DLC at some point.
Yeah, the big mainstream releases, they tend to do at least one DLC release. Right?
Yeah, so I'm just kind of vibing and waiting for that.
All right.
I might start up soon. I'm thinking about restarting and doing like a monotype challenge.
Nice.
I don't know. We'll see if that comes to fruition or not, but
All right.
Do you have a type that you would choose?
I'm kind of thinking I might play it by ear because I might stream that on Twitch, and then when I played through the first time, I did Sprigatito as my starter, so I might just be like, whoever's in chat, be like, hey, should I do Quaxley or Fuecoco, and then whichever one, do either a water or a fire type, just because I haven't really done challenge runs before, and like I personally am not interested in doing a Nuzlocke or anything crazy like that, but just kind of get my feet wet with it and have fun. Use a type that's not too difficult to get a hold of. Like I can get a lot of encounters, and
Do you stream a lot on Twitch?
I have streamed exactly once,
Oh, okay.
but I would like to get into it more. I got a capture card for my birthday, Christmas. They're a week apart. I lose track of what I get for what, but so
I feel like people who have those birthdays around Christmas are always like that. I don't know what it was for. People just get me something.
Well, funnily enough, I told my mom the brand that I wanted. I was like, I want an AverMedia capture card. This is exactly what I want. And bless her, she tried to look online and couldn't figure it out because there was 3 different things. She tried going into Best Buy and talking to the guy there and couldn't figure it out. So she finally was like, here's my card, buy it for yourself.
Was it the one I had lent you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then when I got back from winter break, I was moving very soon, so I didn't want to get everything hooked up. But now that I have at least gotten my desk set up, I think I'm going to try to hook that up and just kind of start doing that casually.
Yeah.
Because especially living alone right now, before the kitty gets here, I'm like, wow, this is such a big space, and I'm alone a lot. And it's like, I like hanging out in Twitch streams, but I also kind of like playing games.
Yeah. No, I mean, that sounds good. That sounds like a fun way to keep it, I think a lot of people do Twitch streaming as a hobby, and that seems to be the right way to approach it.
Yeah.
The people I worry about are the people who are like, I'm getting into Twitch streaming, and this is going to be my future.
Yeah, it's never gonna be a career for me. It might become a side hustle if I get to the point where like people would subscribe and stuff like that, but that's the furthest I see it going.
There was a Twitter thread going around this past week of somebody complaining that people were using USB mics to do Twitch streaming. And then it was all the people who basically do it professionally chiming in going, no, shut up. Like,
Yeah.
you should absolutely start with a USB mic. Like,
I'm starting with the mic that's built into my computer.
Right. Like, do not go out and spend tons of money to get into this. It's a hobby.
Yeah.
Until you start making money, like, just think of it as a hobby.
No, and even then, like, the people who I know who do want to do it full time and like make it their career, they've got Ko-Fi set up, they've got Throne, all that. So it's like, hey, like, I'm not going out and just spending $400 on this equipment.
Sure.
If you think that my current equipment isn't good enough, help me out.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely. All right. Mario, what have you been playing?
This past week, let's see, I'm trying to think. Last Friday, we played a questionable N64 racing game, as we do most Fridays. We also talked about it last week. A friend and I did a race of the GoldenEye campaign, and I got to control, and that's where I always get... I think I've had enough of this video game because that is a level that I will never be a fan of, even though it does have good music. And it's a race that we've done, so when it came out, I think neither of us played it on the Switch. I think we both played it on the N64, but I know a couple of friends, they dabbled in some of the Switch Online for the multiplayer, and they had a ton of fun. And so I think we've talked about trying to do that sometime soon. But what I've played most over this past week, friends and I have only just this past week started getting into Vampire Survivors. We had played a different Survivor-like before called Hollow Cure. One friend is really into like the HoloLive VTubers. And so
That's the one you, I think, told me about last semester.
And I think that game does some stuff that Vampire Survivors doesn't do that I like better. But, because we played that one a bunch, and I think all of us had Game Pass, we were like, it might be worth actually playing Vampire Survivors. And so we've, a few of us have really started to get into it. And it's a lot of fun. I certainly understand. I know, Justin, you had it as your game of the year. I think a lot of people should have it on their game of the year for 2022. I certainly understand why people are so enthralled by it.
Yeah, and I think that's a game, the more you play it, the more your appreciation for it grows.
I would absolutely agree that that's been my experience and my friend's experience.
So I know a few people I've talked to they like play it the first day for like an hour, and they're like, yeah, it's cool. Like, I guess I sort of get it. And then I go, well, keep playing it. And they're like, okay, I'll keep at it. And then the more they play it, they're like, okay, this game goes places. It goes like weird places. I wasn't really expecting it to go. And I think that's, for me and a lot of people I talk to, is where the sort of fanatical love of the game comes from, because like it is a much deeper and much more interesting game than it looks at first glance.
Yeah, it is a much bigger game than the other one that we had played, which makes sense. I mean, the other one is a fan-made game. And it does actually have an update coming soon, and I know we're kind of excited to check that out when it comes out. But Vampire Survivors, I'm not surprised because I've seen people, but at the same time, I guess I wasn't expecting just how much there is to do in that game. Achievements-wise, characters-wise, there really is a lot. And so, I've had a good time with it. Other than that, I haven't played much. Some friends and I have talked about, I think maybe tomorrow, trying out Archipelago, which is a website that hosts multi-game, multi-world playthroughs where basically you could be playing the game and whatever game you're playing, whatever game your friend is playing, you might find items for their game and your game, and they might find items for your game and their game. So there's a lot of whether it be like you could be playing Super Metroid, and maybe one of the E-tanks in my Super Metroid game is actually a sword in Ocarina of Time for a friend, or he finds the ice beam for me, and where it should be the bow and arrow chest or something like that. So right. I had some friends, they did a Pokemon playthrough. I think they both did. It was either red or blue last week or 2 weeks ago. And so we've talked about maybe doing that. And so
that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Yeah, we do a lot of like randomizers, and I know the multi-worlds are very popular. I haven't participated in one just because they can get really big, and you sort of get to this point where you can't go any further until somebody, finds a particular item. I think the joke is that is a BK mode, in the sense of that's where you take your trip to Burger King to go get food while you're just waiting, because you literally cannot play the game until somebody finds whatever item it is you're looking for. But I definitely think they're an interesting thing. I mean, with my interest in games and games communities from an academic sense as well, I'm certainly excited just for the fact of this as a possibility for people to play.
Yeah, because that sounds to some degree kind of like the randomizers, right?
It's like a randomizer on steroids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but as you said, it's adding that community aspect into it, which, I know some of those randomizers, you can get like essentially a broken seed where like you can't progress because you need a certain item to get through. But like where this sounds like really cool, where like, okay, well, maybe you do get to a point you can't progress anymore, and you just kind of have to wait until somebody else finds it. And yeah, so yeah, you take a Burger King break, your friend is having to DoorDash because they can't leave their computer.
Yeah, I want to say I was when I was still in Boise, but I know they a couple of like bigger stream communities, I want to say put together a multi-world of Ocarina of Time. So it was only Ocarina of Time. I want to say they had like over 150 or 200 people playing. So you had like 200 simultaneous people all finding things for each other.
Oh my goodness.
And I think like it crashed a number of times. But,
Say that sounds like Twitch plays Pokemon.
Yeah, when it gets that big, I don't know just how well it handles it, but I'm seeing the people who do like 8-person or 10-person multi-worlds there. They're definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah. Well, that sounds cool. What was the N64 bad racing game?
I think it was called World Driver Championship. I am just not a fan of racing games. I'll put that out there. So I say it's bad. That is just my own opinion on it, and that's my opinion on a lot of racing games. It is also just the way we tend to do those games of we play it for an evening, and we sort of race to this goal. That is not the way. This is more of like a simulator than like an arcade racer. And so like this is a game that expects you to like put in time. And so playing it for just a handful of hours, you're kind of just doing the same race over and over and over again to reach this next rank, to unlock this next cup, to do this thing. And even though, friends did reach higher ranks than I did, I think for most of them, they were just like getting those points to progress by just doing like the rookie cup over and over and over again, rather than even going into like the more difficult ones. Because I think that's my thing with a lot of racing games is the balance just rarely seems to be there. It's either very easy or it's so technical that you need to have like this depth of knowledge. And a lot of games do it. There's just this spike, and that in between, I feel like tends to be missing. So,
yeah, and I feel like the games that nail that in between tend to end up being games we talk about years later. So, like the original F-Zero,
sure,
and really even the sequels to that. I feel like that franchise does that balance well, where it's easy enough for anyone to play it, but there's enough of a challenge that is not obviously not a super like simulator type challenge. And so like there's fun to be had, and you can get good at it without having to, dedicate your entire life to playing this one game. Right. And so I've always felt that. I feel like Forza has done that really well with the Horizon series, the Forza Horizon series. Like I have no interest in playing Forza Motorsport because I just don't care that much about cars. But Forza Horizon is more the sort of pick up and play, and this is kind of fun, and I don't have to take it all that serious. But like, there's some actual challenge here, and so I feel like that series has done this whole thing really well. Because I have the same problem you do. I don't really like the sim games, but very basic arcade games just bore me very quickly.
Yeah, and that's where I put it on my list. The cruising games, I think. Of the racing games I've played on the N64, and those are very much more that arcade style, but
sure,
those are a blast, and I think they hold up really well even today.
Cruise and Blast is the sorry,
no, pun not intended, but that's a good catch.
Puns always intended.
Yeah, just take credit for it. Have you played Beetle Adventure Racing?
That is one that they played before I started joining. So as I'm going through and catching up on old games, I want to say it's coming up here pretty soon for me.
Okay. That was one of my favorite racing games on the N64. That's a really cool game. So I haven't played it recently, but it's one of those games I keep thinking, like, I need to go back and play some Beetle Adventure Racing. All right, OJ, what have you been playing?
So like Mario, I've been playing a lot of Vampire Survivors this week. I decided to try and give it another try on my phone, and it's better now that I'm more used to the size of it. it's still not as good as playing it on a PC because like things are really small and I'm missing a lot of stuff. Like the map will show me that there's like a rosary there and I just cannot find it at all. But I'm farther now on my phone than I was on the PC. Going through and playing it now, just because I have more time to play it. Like, oh, I'm taking a break, I can just play a real quick game here rather than like going to my laptop. Oh, I'm watching TV, I can just play while I'm doing it rather than moving to my computer.
Sure.
So I am farther now, and like you said, the game keeps on getting bigger and bigger as I move through it. So.
And yet the screen stays small.
Yeah, I know, right? But now that I'm used to it on the phone, it's not as horrible. It's still not. I still wish it was different on the phone, but I can play it now. I was considering it kind of unplayable, but I can play it now. I don't think there was an update or anything, but I think now that I'm just more used to the scale and the fact that the screen is the other way around. That's where it's like up and down rather than left and right.
Is it? Is it vertically on the phone? Okay.
Yeah. One of the reasons why it was kind of weird, but then.
Well, it does horizontally on like my iPad, so I didn't know.
I actually haven't checked it. Maybe it can be.
How does it control? Do you like
with your finger?
Okay.
Yeah. You can have a joystick on the screen if you want, but I don't. I just move through and drag, and
but it's still like you're manipulating a virtual joystick.
Yeah.
While you're doing it.
Yeah. And so having it vertical, though, is there's a weapon that I didn't get in the first one, the run through. I didn't unlock her. But it's a Song of Mana, and it's a big vertical thing. And so that's nice because it covers the entire screen of my phone. And I was like, oh, this is, actually really, really good playing through with that.
You need that for some of the levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I figured out the combo that I like is the garlic evolved, and then the Bible evolved, and then the Song of Mana isn't evolved yet, but then it just takes out everything. I could just sit there and let everything go through. So finally got to a point where I could just walk away if I need to and just collect a bunch of gems.
You can do your Burger King run.
Yeah. And then in Final Fantasy XIV, I finished the main storyline quest. I feel like they jumped the shark a little bit. At the end.
A Japanese role-playing game?
Man.
I hear that. But yeah, so so now I'm taking time because I switched servers, and there's an option if you're on a really populated server, you can for free move to one that's less populated, a newer one. And then one of the things that you get is a buff called the Road to 80. So level 90 is the top level right now, but it will dramatically increase your experience for all of the other classes up to level 80. So now I'm going through and just leveling all of those while I still have this buff. Playing Black Mage, which I don't know. Each of the classes play differently. I don't particularly like Black Mage. But it's not bad, and I think it gets a little better as they get more spells. But if you don't know, you don't have one character that's a specific job. You can go and change your job, just like in like Final Fantasy II, where you can change your job whenever you want to whatever specific job that you want. Well, I guess a lot of the games have it where you can change your job. So you have one character and you just level all the different jobs. And then eventually I'm going to do the crafting too, but crafting gets kind of boring for me. So I'm waiting till the end to do that. But I'm just boring. I'll probably play Vampire Survivor as well. It's automatically leveling up crafting. So
There you go.
yeah.
And mobile games are perfect for, sort of sim type games and stuff while you're doing those, because there's a lot of sitting around waiting. And so having a mobile game you can quickly play.
Yeah, and while I'm in a queue for dungeons too, it's just like, I'll just sit and wait. They had a downtime where only instances were down, and on every character that I was leveling, every single thing I was doing required an instance. So I was just like, well,
Of course.
Yeah, you might as well have taken the whole game down for me, but fine. Yeah, so that's what I've been doing this week.
All right. Well, let's see. I have played a little bit more of Hi-Fi Rush. Mario, I don't know if you played any more or not.
I have not.
Okay.
I hope to, but yeah, I wasn't able to this week.
Yeah, that's just that's a fantastic game. Like, I mein, for it to be a game just released out of nowhere with no promotion or anything, you know, I've heard some people go, well, why didn't they do more promotion for this game? And you kind of look at it and go, yeah, like, it was great to release this out of nowhere and with no promotion, but like in hindsight, this is, you know, one of the best games that Xbox has released in the last year, and maybe the best game that Xbox has released in the last year. And to like not promote it in any way, just kind of drop it, it just feels like a missed opportunity for them.
And like there's some big names associated with it as well. I mean, I think it's Bethesda and Tokyo Gameworks. Is that what it? Tango Gameworks, I think.
Yeah, Tango. They're the makers of
Tokyo Ghostwire.
Yeah, that was their last big game.
And I know, I think Shinji Mikami is the creator of Resident Evil, is one of the executive producers on it or something like that. And so it's got some big names associated with it. So yeah, I guess that would be another reason why I'm a little surprised that they just dropped it.
Yeah, and I mean, apparently they view this as a small game, though I'm hearing people say it's about 12 hours to beat. So it's not really a small game. I think of a small game kind of like a couple hours long, sort of your go home sort of type games. But yeah, and the style of that game is still just incredible looking. Maybe the best looking game to come out in the last year, which is kind of crazy to say.
Is it still songs from my iPod in 2008?
Yes.
Yes.
That is the entire soundtrack.
Yes.
You're not getting anything else. This is a game very much made by people who are longing for 20 years ago.
Oh gosh, no, 2008 wasn't 20 years ago. Stop it.
15 for 2008, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it's just a really cool game. And again, I think they solved a problem that a lot of these, like Metal Hellsinger, which I really loved last year, that game sort of falls apart if you can't keep on the beat. And the best moments are when you are hitting the beat, but if you can't keep on it, which I've said before, I don't have the best rhythm, so I can't keep on the beat all the time, that game starts to fall apart. This one, even if you can't, it's still fun to play. It's just you're getting that extra bonus if you can. And you're getting those extra cool moments and everything. There's extra animations and stuff if you are staying on it. So I think they've solved that problem really smartly. And so I really think it's a game that anyone can pick up and play. So that's cool. Whereas Metal Hellsinger was a game that very much had a niche audience for it. And I wouldn't say was widespread.
Hi-Fi Rush is Xbox exclusive, isn't it?
It is Xbox and PC.
Okay.
So, yeah, not PlayStation. And I guess Xbox publishing it probably won't ever come to PlayStation. Though weirdly, their last game, Ghostwire Tokyo, was a PlayStation exclusive. That was their deal before.
Just gotta alternate, keep both happy.
Well, all those games that they did as PlayStation exclusives will eventually come to Xbox, so there's always the chance. I kind of feel like Microsoft is at a point where you feel like 2 years after this game has been released, they may just port this game to PlayStation,
Yeah.
They kind of seem more interested in the software side than the hardware side these days. Maybe that'll be part of the deal they struck to get the Activision deal through, because they keep asking for more concessions from Microsoft, and I feel like at some point Sony's just going to be like, yeah, port all your games. Let's see. The other game I played was GoldenEye. I guess they had released it the last Friday while we were doing this podcast, and so I hadn't had a chance to play it yet. So I did play it on Xbox, which is, not a bizarre experience. I've played it on emulator since its original release, but it is a little weird to be playing a game I think of as a very Nintendo game on an Xbox. I feel like if I was playing Zelda on an Xbox, you feel like you're doing something wrong.
Feels like you've entered the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. It's like where your parents who call everything an Xbox, it's like they've spoken this into reality or something. But GoldenEye, that's a game that holds up much better than I think you would expect it to. I don't know how well the multiplayer would hold up, but on the Xbox, they have remapped it so that the right thumbstick does control your look and aim. So, I think that's fantastic. And I think the mission objectives. And so I know some games have copied this, but I remember playing that game when it was originally released and thinking, oh, well, every video game will be this. Every video game will have different difficulty levels, and as you move up, there will be increased objectives during the levels. So if you don't know, if you play on the easiest difficulty level of GoldenEye, you might have one or two objectives. And then when you play the next one, they add an additional objective up until the hardest difficulty, and you just keep adding objectives. So it's almost like... This is going to sound like a weird comparison, but it's almost like the modern Hitman games where you're almost encouraged to go back and replay the levels, and there's different things to accomplish in replaying them. And that's really cool, and it's something that I don't feel like a lot of first-person shooters ever adopted. And maybe they just decided it wasn't worth their time. People weren't going to replay the single-player campaign, and the multiplayer was more worth focusing their time on. But I don't play a lot of first-person shooter in multiplayer that often. And for me, I like the single-player campaigns. And this, to me, is a really cool way to do those single-player campaigns. The other thing I think that's pretty neat is, again, it's a style choice and everything. But a lot of those levels are very sort of open area. It's not an open world by any stretch, but it's very much an open area. They're not funneling you down a corridor during most of those. And you look back now and you look at a lot of comparable shooters, certainly the Call of Duty games are very much kind of, pushing you down a corridor. They're a roller coaster ride, and here's stuff coming at you. I know there are exceptions to that. There have been 100 Call of Duty games, but a lot of them feel that way, whereas this is more, not quite obviously at the scale of Halo, but this is much more, here's this level, you have some things to accomplish, good luck. God be with you. And going back and playing that seemed at the time like such an innovation, and games would be this. And obviously some games were, and Half-Life 2 has a lot of that in it. But not as many first-person shooters as I think I expected when I originally played it. And so it's a kind of an interesting reminder to go back and experience that now. So,
and I think that's an interesting comparison between GoldenEye and the Hitman, especially with, not to jump forward necessarily, but with Hitman 3, just recently, just the other day, kind of rebranding itself as, was it Hitman World of Assassination?
Yeah.
They sort of have this new roguelike mode in the Hitman where you go on these missions, but now the missions have these very specific objectives. But you could go to, this place, you lose, okay, you go back to this place, and those missions are now completely different.
Right.
Kill these, the target in a new way or a different way. And so I think, to think about it in the sense of it's encouraging this replayability because there's so much you can do. There isn't just this one path of this is how you do it, but, to have these new ways, and to think about, GoldenEye in the sense of, while there aren't different, objectives each time you play. I mean, if you play on the, whatever difficulty, those objectives stay the same every time, but that you could get that new experience if you were to go back with a different difficulty.
Yeah, and I think that's the logical evolution of today, right, is to have it more roguelike, where those objectives, we were just talking about randomizers, right? The idea that you could make it feel new each time. And so they do that in Hitman by, saying, okay, well, yeah, you're still going to have to kill this guy, but you're going to have to do it with this specific weapon. So part of the challenge is finding access to that weapon and, getting it to that person to kill them. So thinking about that for a first-person game like GoldenEye, it makes a whole lot of sense, right? Like, if you were doing that game today, you'd probably make it an awful lot more like GoldenEye or Hitman.
Yeah, it almost feels like, sort of that, what is the games as service type of model where it's like, the joke about Destiny. It's the only game you'll ever need for the rest of your life, and the sense that we're just going to, kind of keep adding to it. Where, I know for a lot of my friends, like they love Ocarina of Time, and now they can just play it forever and have a new experience with it every time. Or, with another friend, it's a Link to the Past. They can play it forever and have a new experience of it every single time. That almost feels like this. It makes sense as this next step in games that it's like, well, how do we really ramp up this replayability so that people keep coming back to it and, they keep talking about it, stays in like the cultural conversation around games for longer than, hey, this is the game that came out this week, and 3 weeks later, nobody's really talking about it anymore.
Yeah, and I think if you're asking people to spend $70 now at launch for, God of War, right? Yeah, the production values are there, and the gameplay time might even be there, to play through it once. But are people coming back and playing through that game a second or third time? And I think very few people are. So if you're not going to put, if you're not going to put a multiplayer game in there as well, then how do you give people more value for that single player game? And I think that's, that makes a whole lot of sense. I could see Nintendo very much, and I don't know if they've done something like this in the past, but I could see them doing that with like a Pokemon game.
I don't think Nintendo ever has, but Pokemon randomizers are huge.
Right.
I mean, I've seen map randomizers, I've seen Mon randomizers, I've seen universal randomizers that change everything. Mm-hmm. One of the streamers I follow has been playing Pokemon Infinite Fusion, where you're fusing together your different Pokemon to work with that. And actually, Did You Know Gaming did a video last year where they were talking about originally they had wanted to make every single copy of Pokemon Red and Pokemon Green unique and individual like that. Mm. And they just didn't have the capability to put that on the Game Boy.
Right.
But yeah, it's just really interesting how we have this as like part of our, because I think, like you said, when you're going back and there's not necessarily a reason to replay it, mm-hmm. like someone who is really into the game will probably still go replay it.
Right.
And then you have something like, say, Pokemon, where, okay, well, you can go replay it with a new starter and with a new team and all that. We're still like, but we want more.
Right.
We want more random. We want more chaos. We want a Sync to be our starter instead of any Pokemon.
Well, and that seems to make a whole lot of sense as like a new game plus mode, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe there's a set path the first time you play through it, but then the second, third time you're going through, you have that chance to alter it. And, to give Nintendo credit, they're the ones who started this with the Master Quest in the original Zelda.
I was going to say, the original Zelda was New Game Plus OG.
Right. And so, I mean, they did this sort of like, okay, you played through the game. Now we're just going to mix everything up, and it feels like an entire new second quest. Mm-hmm. It's not really, but it feels that way when you're playing through it.
No, it's a whole new map. It really kind of is. Like, you have the same objective, but it really is a whole new game.
Well, I mean, the locations to the temples have been moved around and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I could see somebody doing this more. And, like, Hitman seems to have been... I haven't actually played the... what is it? Freelancer? Is that what it's called?
I think that's the mode.
Yeah.
That's remarketed itself as Hitman World of Assassination.
Yeah, so if you buy Hitman 3 now, it just contains all the maps from 1 through 3 under the new Hitman World of Assassination title. But I haven't played that new freelancer mode, but yeah, I think it's really cool that they're doing that because the people who are still super into that, I actually have a friend who streams Hitman specifically. He plays Hitman and he does all the like weird things you can think to do with it. And, like this gives him an infinite way to continue streaming that. Because like at some point, theoretically, he would have had to quit, right? Now he can just keep doing it forever. So that's really cool. All right, let's move on to news. And first, number one news story, the most important thing of all, Alicia, they have announced that DualSense controllers can now be updated wirelessly. You do not have to physically plug them into the PlayStation 5. Alicia, tell us how excited you are.
I am so excited, y'all. I'm going to Disney World. I am so, this is just such a big moment. I want to thank the Playing for Pets events for introducing me to my love of updating controllers. I want to thank the podcast team for making sure that I never forget that key moment in my life.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's really the very least we can do.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to my sister, even though I know she can't wait for me to come home and update that PS5 controller because she wants to play it before I can come home. It's okay. I know that I'm there in spirit with you.
I mean, you could update it now from your bedroom. You don't even have to be.
I would need the controller first. Oh man.
Yeah, so
I hope this joke never dies.
well,
Don't ever let it die.
It's going on close to a year now, so I wouldn't count on it dying. I feel like there's going to be some reunion like 30 years from now.
Come back for SIU homecoming.
Yeah.
And come do a special guest episode on the podcast. Justin will be...
I'll still be doing the podcast
on the verge of
years.
retirement. But come back one more time and be like, here, have this, and just hand over a wireless controller and be like, you know what to do.
I hope you know I'm buying controllers and just stocking them so that they haven't been updated. So one day you can just open them all and update them and fulfill your destiny. So we had to, I mean, that is news, but we had to include it for Alicia there. There's not a whole lot to say about that other than it's kind of weird this hasn't been doable before, so good on Sony for fixing it.
It's about time.
Yeah.
It's about time. I need to fulfill my lifelong mission.
In other news, Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo all have announced they will not be part of E3. Well, I guess they haven't announced. IGN has announced from sources they have that all three of them will not be officially part of E3. So they will not be on the show floor. They will not be doing their announcements as part of E3. That does not mean they won't be doing anything during that time frame. So they could still be hosting their own announcement. Obviously, Microsoft the last few years has been doing their announcements not at the same time as at the same time as E3, but actually across the street at the formerly Nokia Theater that they bought, which is now the Microsoft Theater. So this is, Sony has not been part of E3 the last few years, but this is kind of the end of an era. None of the major hardware manufacturers will be at E3.
It just makes me sad. Which, I have no personal investment in this. It's not like I've ever been to E3 or been supremely, I'm the lurker who I don't watch the E3 announcements as they come out, but I see everybody else talking about them, and I'm like, ooh, that's cool. Ooh, that's cool. But just the thought of none of the three of them being there That's like Marvel and DC deciding to not go to San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's the equivalent of if you lost them, what is... I mean, San Diego Comic-Con has kind of grown and mutated in some ways that it can continue, but like you do think like if those two pulled out, what is San Diego Comic-Con?
Yeah.
So you think they're putting all of their eggs in the Summer Games thing basket?
Summer Games Fest.
Yeah, Summer Games Fest basket.
They haven't announced that officially yet. I kind of think that these three companies... So, like, if you think back to Apple basically at some point said, we don't have to go to the big trade shows. We don't have to go to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show. We don't have to go to these other ones. We'll just go do our own thing. And we're big enough now that when we hold a press conference, the media will come to us. And, granted, they're in San Francisco, so they're not, like, in the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
But... when you look at Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo, I mean, Sony's they're in California somewhere. I forget where their main office is, but I think it's near San Francisco. And then the other two are basically right outside Seattle. So again, I think they've got to a point where they said, if we do an event, we can just hold a press conference and people will show up because we're the big dogs in the industry. We don't have to go to these events that cost money to even just to be there, but then to build out a big exhibit and everything. So, yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine they'll completely bypass the ability to show off their games to people. Certainly the media, and maybe Summer Games Fest is where they do that. But I kind of feel like there was a time E3 was... one day is Sony's press conference, and the next day is Microsoft, and that afternoon is Nintendo, and then, Electronic Arts the next day. And you had this whole line, and it feels like they've all decided we don't need to be at E3. We're just going to do our own shows on our own schedule.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the big question is, do they do it during that time frame? Or, like last year, I think Nintendo held their big conference in July. They didn't do it in June when all this was going on. So does Nintendo just say, screw it, we're going to do it whenever we want?
I'm going to be petty and do it while Sony is doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the question is that good for games and the game industry? Because what you had is people could go to this one big event each year and cover all of this. And so you did get what we'd think of as mainstream press. You did get your USA Today showing up at E3, your Wall Street Journal, these sorts of places that maybe don't put a whole lot of emphasis on games normally, but they were during that week because it was the biggest thing in the country going on during that week. And the more this dissipates, does that hurt the game industry somehow?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing will be the lack of access to these games. As they would be announced, they would typically be, I think a lot of them would be available on the floor to test out or to have some sort of demo. And the fact that that's no longer an opportunity for at least, these three companies to be able to show off whatever it is that they're working on, to get it in the hands of members of the media, the press, and even just gamers themselves who are able to attend. I don't think it's going to affect them that much, but I think that's, certainly a disappointing aspect.
Yeah, you kind of wonder how much COVID plays into this. COVID forced all this to be remote, and did it basically make them all go, hey, like this went fine. We don't need something physical. I mean, I agree with you. I hate that there's not going to be that physical element because I do think there is something to be said about that, but I don't know. It seems very much an end of an era.
And are we going to lose, you go to E3 and you find something neat that's there when you go for the big names and you find the hidden gems.
Right. Does this hurt the more indie titles in the process? Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to hear their plans. Obviously, Summer Games Fest is still happening. E3 is still happening. They're basically happening I think like a week apart or something. So there's still going to be something going on, but like the big question is what that'll be. I mean, Summer Games Fest last year gave us our first real look at Street Fighter 6. So, you know, there were still big games that got announced during that time that weren't from the big three hardware manufacturers. So, you know, I assume we'll still see some of that kind of stuff. Let's see. I included this specifically for Ryan, and then he doesn't show up. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the adventure board game, has been released. So if you want more Skyrim, if in the last decade you have not tired of Skyrim, there is now finally in board game. There was an Alexa game of Skyrim where you could like talk.
Seriously?
Yeah. Like when they announced it, everybody thought it was a joke, and then they were like, "No, that's real."
Oh my gosh.
You can talk to your Alexa and play some version of Skyrim, and now they have a board game version. So, Ryan, what are you doing? You were supposed to be here to get very excited about a new board game.
Probably at home playing the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, the adventure board game.
It probably is. Ryan, if you're listening, we're on to you. OJ will be waiting for your return.
OJ will be in the parking lot and be like,
The longer you make me wait, the worse it is.
The PlayStation 5 has passed the Genesis in lifetime shipped units at 32 million. And of course, these are basically selling out as soon as they release. So even though this is their ship number, this is probably also their sold through. Those are, if you don't know, those are two different numbers. So companies will often report, we've shipped this. That just means that they have sent it out to distributors. So that may mean it's sitting in a warehouse at, you know, Walmart or something. And then they have their sold through, which is how many they've actually sold. But again, PlayStation, they're selling every one of these that they can produce. So if they haven't sold the full 32 million, they will in the coming weeks. But that puts them past the Genesis. And I think this always shocks me when somebody points out numbers like this. The Genesis was so huge back in the 90s. You know, it was just equal with the Super Nintendo and the number of people you knew had a Genesis versus Super Nintendo. You know, obviously the classic console war. And to think that, you know, they've already passed that. And, you know, that their systems have sold 3 times this amount. You know, the PlayStation 4, for example, so 3 times the Wii, you know, the DS. So it's kind of mind-blowing to think about this, how much bigger the games industry is today versus 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So congratulations, PlayStation 5. Actually, you know, they said in the next few weeks you should be able to walk into stores and get one. So if you're
for about 2 hours, and then they'll all be gone again.
Well, they celebrated with the wireless controller updates.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
They knew what was really important in restocking those PS5s. They knew what was really important.
So speaking of PlayStation, they put out a new ad. This was kind of a neat ad. I think it was for Australia was the target market, but the ad features lots of different sort of kind of, I guess, segments from different games, but they're all live action. So like they have a live action, somebody in a Spider-Man costume running around and these sorts of things. But the ad concludes, and it's for PlayStation 5, it concludes with a scene that looks an awful lot like something out of an Uncharted game.
Didn't we just talk last week about they said they were done with Uncharted?
yeah.
So the developer Naughty Dog, who's made all the Uncharted games, has said they're done with it. But that doesn't keep
Okay.
Sony from making, you know, another studio from stepping in and making a new Uncharted game.
I see.
There have been rumors for a while that they were going to do a remake of Uncharted 1, because if you have ever played Uncharted 1, it is the like sort of odd man out of the Uncharted series. It really feels, you know, it doesn't have the feel of the later games. It doesn't have nearly the huge set pieces that the later games do. So there's been talk for a while that they would go back and, redo that game. And so it might be something as simple as that, or it might be an entirely new game.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'd like to see the Uncharted series continue, in some form or fashion, even if it's not with Nathan Drake. So, let's see. Bloomberg reports that 343 Industries is starting from scratch with the Halo franchise. They're going to start working with the Unreal Engine and focus on multiplayer. So it sounds like we'll probably get more Halo, but it may be a new multiplayer game, entirely multiplayer focused and not new single player content. So, I guess that's good news, and that 343 Industries isn't shut down completely, which is what it sounded like a few weeks ago when they had the major layoffs. But I guess we'll have to see what's coming of that. Ubisoft has announced the Crew Motorfest. Anybody ever played any of the Crew games? Anybody care about the Crew?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
They're racing games. The premise was originally you're racing.
So, Mario, you're really interested in that, right?
I mean, I have heard of the Crew, but I've never played it.
He's got to wait another 30 years before he can play through all the current Xbox games. But yeah, so this is the premise of the Crew series has always been you're racing from like one end of the United States to the other. So it's like that you can race across the entire United States. So this instantly,
so many arcade racing games.
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, it always makes me think like, why aren't we getting a Cannonball Run video game? But that just shows my age. So I mean, this seems to be. I don't really know what this game is. I mean, it's still an arcade-style racer, which is what all the Crew games are, so we'll see. Star Wars Jedi Survivor has been delayed 6 weeks to April 28th. Not a whole lot to that other than just another delay. Rumbleverse, the wrestling-themed Battle Royale, is shutting down. This game just launched in the fall. And it's already shutting down. And I mostly include this because it is shutting down. Also shutting down is Knockout City, which is the dodgeball multiplayer game. EA is also shutting down Apex Legends Mobile and Battlefield Mobile, which I didn't even know those were. I didn't know that Battlefield Mobile was a thing. I think I had heard of Apex Legends Mobile. They also announced today, this is not EA, but the developers have announced that they're shutting down Crossfire X, which was a multiplayer first-person shooter. So a lot of these, Mario, earlier you mentioned live service games. These are all live service games. These were all games sort of going for that Fortnite money. I mean, that very much seemed to be the target with it. They're all shutting down. So all these companies tried to pivot to live service games, and it looked like it kind of blew up in their faces.
Yeah. I have not played any of these. I will say I've watched one of my favorite streamers played a lot of Rumbleverse, and it seemed like a cool game. He had a lot of fun with it. It was a lot of fun to watch. I think like the wrestling aspect of it was a cool, unique thing as compared to a shooter like most BRs seem to be. So yeah, when I saw that, thinking about watching his streams, that was definitely disappointing. But yeah.
Yeah, it was a cool game. It let you do like elbow drops off the top of a skyscraper onto somebody. So, you're in a city and you're wrestling, but you're doing your moves in the city. And so,
oh my gosh, that sounds.
I'm sad I missed it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's sort of the problem, right? The problem with these live service games is if you miss it, there's no going back to it later, right? I mean, certainly on this podcast, we talk a lot about, hey, I'm picking up this game 2 years after it came out because I found it cheap and I'm going to check this out and everything.
OJ, what was it that you shut down that I can't remember?
Congregate.
Congregate.
Yeah. But there just isn't that option for these live service games, right? Like Rumbleverse is just gone.
Yeah.
Like you can't play it after it shuts down.
And that's the thing is, I think that's ultimately the downfall is when, I think this is exactly what you're saying, is that like when your entire model is, we have to have a player base and like kind of a big player base. When it starts to fall off, you just kind of lose out on a lot of it. I know that has kind of been my friend's experience with Switch Sports is, they're still playing it and it's still a fun game, but because the only way that you can get the cosmetics, as far as I know, is by playing online, a lot of their matches end up being against bots. Because it's just, kind of not as popular. People aren't playing it the same way that they were when it came out in July or whenever it was.
Yeah, and at least Switch Sports have, like some other games like Halo, if the multiplayer isn't popular, you can still play it locally. You can still play it. I think there's single player component and everything. So there's still something you can do with that game. These games are just gone with these live service games. There's nothing else to do, right? And so, you might miss out on some cosmetics with Switch Sports, but the game still works. There's still something there. When these games don't hit, and a lot of these games are a few months after they launch, they don't hit. They're just gone.
Yeah.
And, there's no long tail to them where you can still pull in some income and maybe, make that up to some degree. There's a lot of games out there that people are still buying on Steam 10 years after the game. Well, Skyrim. People are still buying Skyrim, and they keep putting out new editions of it. And you look at it and you go, well, if Skyrim were a live service game that didn't hit big right away, you'd have no opportunity for that. And it's kind of interesting because obviously EA and some other companies have pivoted towards this. Sony has announced that they're working on, I think, something like 10 live service games. And their kind of philosophy has been, we're going to just kind of shotgun it and
say, throw it at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, hopefully one of these will connect for us. But
Sony's got the money to, if 9 of them fail and 1 succeeds, it's fine. But
well, if one of them is a Fortnite, like you look at Epic. Epic doesn't make anything else. That's it. I mean, they have like one game, basically. I know they've bought things like Rocket League and stuff, but they bought Rocket League with the money they've made from Fortnite.
Yeah.
So, like a lot of these companies seem to be betting it all on these live service games, and obviously it's not working out.
And this really makes me think about like MMOs too. When they're shut down, like that game is gone. Because I think of EverQuest. EverQuest is still running, and I was playing it a little bit again after playing it like originally when it came out for a while, and it really can't be single player.
That's the one I was thinking of that you had talked about before.
And then like World of Warcraft eventually is going to shut down, and then those games are going to be gone. Now, it would be nice if they made a single player one, but they really can't. And I know that there's some EverQuest emulators out there, but they still require a server, and they don't have the whole game because like so much of it is on their end and not on the game's end. So it's not the same experience, and so those games are just going to be gone. And there's a lot of fantastic stories in those games, and just some really awesome gameplay. And they're just going to be gone like this at some point.
Especially thinking about, games of those magnitude, like what they mean in the history of like games as well. I mean, it's regardless, it's unfortunate, that like Rumbleverse and Knockout City are going to shut down. But, you think about like WoW is massive part of what games history is, and like deserves to be talked about and deserves to be preserved. And so,
Yeah, and that's a big issue that lots of people have been dealing with. How do we preserve these games? How do we preserve, and I think you're right. Certainly the big ones like World of Warcraft, EverQuest, those two matter probably more than just about any other MMOs. But there's MMOs that paved the way for them, right?
Yeah.
So there's the Air Warriors, there's the Ultima Onlines, and they matter just as much to be preserved. And even some of the weirder stuff that, was very niche even at the time, probably is worth preserving. And I know some people have basically, as OJ was talking about, that's why we ended up with WoW Classic. People were running, sort of classic versions of WoW online. And finally, Blizzard said, well, we'll just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
But I know some of these games that have completely shut down, like City of Heroes and the Matrix Online, people have basically set up servers to like kind of keep running them, which is really cool. But it's also kind of weird, and particularly with these games, I don't even know if that's possible in the same way that it is with those MMOs.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see, but it would be a shame to see those games just entirely disappear.
Also, in a couple of years, we're going to be seeing this with all of the NFT and blockchain games.
Oh, wait. Yeah. I think we're already seeing it with those. It's just nobody's
Years
crying.
is a very,
What a
generous
disappointment.
estimate.
Yeah.
What a disappointment.
Years, months, weeks, days.
As we're
Hours.
doing this.
Yeah, I feel like that's last semester talking to my students about Elon Musk buying Twitter, and I'm like, this is imploding. I don't know when. I can't tell you when. But it may be before we're back on Monday. So speaking of EA, they have reportedly canceled an in-development Titanfalls game called Titanfalls Legend. This was going to be a single-player game that tried to bridge Titanfall with Apex Legends. So Titanfall is their mech game. Apex Legends is their battle royale style game. And they were going to try to bridge these two together. They have always been set in the same universe, but they were going to try to figure out a way. The Titanfall games never sold exceptionally well, even though Titanfall 2 is an amazing game, and I highly encourage you to play it if you haven't. But they were trying to figure out a way to kind of bridge the two of these and throw a bone to the Titanfall fans. Well, they've canceled it. So I guess we won't be getting that, and it probably means there will not be any new Titanfall games in certainly the immediate future, in the near future. So kind of sad news there. Happier news I don't know, maybe this is dark news for the two of you. I feel like OJ and Alicia have found a new game they're going to have to buy.
Yeah, it's dark news for my wallet.
Pyrowash Simulator, one of my top 10 games of last year, is releasing free Midgard DLC. So Final Fantasy VII DLC, where you can clean Midgard, and Midgard definitely needs a cleaning.
Midgard absolutely needs it. You know what? Sign me up. I will work for the Shinra Electric Power Company. Let's go. I'll do it.
Washing inside of the Honeybee Club.
There you go. Perfect.
Oh, no.
I don't know if a power washer is going to be enough for that.
I think the only thing, you have to kill it with fire.
Yeah. Burn down the Honeybee Club. Burn down Don Corneo's mansion. Oh my gosh.
But this follows their announcement that they're doing Tomb Raider DLC for that game as well. So this is really cool. That game already has a ton of stages in it. There's a ton of content in there, and them releasing free DLC of, very popular game franchises is just really cool of them.
Yeah, and I will say the fact that it's free DLC is why I'm like, yeah, I'm going to buy Power Wash Simulator for this. Because if it was like, buy Power Wash Simulator and then pay $20 for Midgard DLC, I'd be like, no. But
yeah, look, I'd recommend Power Wash Simulator on its own. I think with this DLC, if you're a fan of one of these properties, I don't know the extent of this DLC, right? I don't think you're going to be cleaning all of Midgard.
well, even if you clean all of Midgard, it's still only like a smidgen of the Final Fantasy VII map, so there's still plenty more.
Open world Midgard, just you and your
just years of playtime.
That's the actual part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
You have to clean the plate.
So The image that they did release showed Cloud's motorcycle, so that's really all they showed. They showed the little compact car in the background. That's from the game. So that's all they've shown. So I don't know. It could be something as simple as like a car showroom, and it's just the vehicles from the game that you're cleaning. So I don't know. But if you're going to announce this, I feel like it's got to be something more significant than just Cloud's motorcycle.
Yeah.
So who knows what it might include. Let's see. Bloomberg claims that Sony is cutting PSVR 2 launch production in half from 2 million to just 1 million. Sony denies this. So Bloomberg put out this story. Sony put out a statement soon after saying, no, this is not true. I think this kind of goes to what we've talked about here on the podcast, that PSVR 2 is really, really expensive, and there doesn't seem to be the hype around it that there was the first time. So this kind of seems to make logical sense. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. God, I'm trying to even remember the numbers on. Wasn't it like $600 or something?
I think it's $550 or it's $600 if it comes with a game.
Yeah. Like, how can they really be surprised that it doesn't have the same kind of hype when it's that expensive? Like, I love gaming, don't get me wrong, but does anyone have $1,000 to just drop on this?
Right. And not everybody who wants a PS5 has it yet either.
Yeah.
So,
Like,
yeah, and I think, because you're talking about spending $400 to $500 on a PlayStation 5, then spending another $550, $600 on the VR helmet. So you're getting close to $1,000 of investment. And if you're just
before you even have any games.
right, and if you're just really interested in VR, you can still go get an Oculus Quest 2 or whatever they're selling now, $400. I know they raised the price. I always forget what the new price is. But I know at Christmas they had it down to the old price on some sales and everything because my niece got one. And, like that just seems so much of an easier entry into that. If you want to play VR, that's the easy way in.
yeah.
And it seems like if you really want to get deep into VR, if like you're kind of fanatical about it, you're going to go the PC route. Because there's all the extra stuff you can do on PC.
Yeah.
So I guess my thing I keep coming back to with this is, who is this for? Like, what's the market for this?
Yeah, it's weird. It's a sort of a surreal moment because I think I was listening just the other day to the episode where you were talking about the PSVR 2. And so I'm like, wait, you just talked about this. It was like 3 months ago, probably. But yeah, I mean, I think the PSVR 2 has to be banking on some solid exclusives. I mean, beyond that, I don't really even know what else. Yeah, why you would go this route.
And I think the weird thing is those exclusives haven't been shown off yet in the way that you think they would, right? Like there haven't been the big exclusives that you can't play anywhere else other than PSVR 2. It seems like a lot of the software is ports, which is fine. Like obviously you want to get a Beat Saber on there. So like, okay, cool. Definitely put Beat Saber on there. But then what are the things that I can't do on Oculus Quest 2?
Yeah.
The one, and I'm probably making this up because I feel like you would have mentioned it. The Resident Evil 4 remake is going to have a VR component, right? But is that expected to be?
Well, is it the remake or is it 8 that they're releasing VR content for?
That, like I said, I feel like somewhere in the back of my head, I know something about like one of the new Resident Evils, and I feel like it's 4 remake, but it might be 8.
Yeah, I can't remember because 7 had the VR mode for the original PSVR, and for a lot of people that was the selling point for the original PSVR. So yeah, there is a Resident Evil. You're right, and I forget which one it is because I can't keep all the Resident. Capcom's putting out like 2 Resident Evils a year now. It feels like.
Yeah.
They've gotten like the Pokemon company. Like, there's millions of Pokemon games every year now.
Well, yeah, it is like Pokemon in the sense of like, okay, we're gonna remake an earlier gen and have a new one.
Yeah. So that Resident Evil 4 remake is coming out soon. So it very well may be that is coming along with and everything. And so yeah, that's cool.
You'd think they would market it more if that was going to be the exclusive. You'd think that they'd make that connection in the marketing.
Well, they do have the Horizon
Yes.
VR experience, but it hasn't been very clear how big of an experience that is. Is that something that's going to be a couple hours, or is that a full game? It doesn't look like a full game.
That's what it's like. Horizon Call of the Mountain or something like that.
Yeah, something like it's got mountain in the title.
It does have mountain. It looks cool. I have not played either of the Horizons. I would like to at some point, but and you hear fantastic things about them. So I think it's a great idea for them to have a VR experience with the Horizon world. But yeah, I haven't seen anything beyond what the actual game for that would be.
Yeah, I mean, Horizon, that's a very beautiful game franchise. It was our runner-up for most aesthetically pleasing game of 2022. So, yeah, I mean, it would be fantastic. I would love to play that, right? But I'm not going to make a $550 investment for a Horizon game.
Yeah, I don't think that game is $550 worth,
Yeah, so I just keep going back to I don't know who the market for this is. Because VR is cool, but also VR, it's hard to justify owning multiple headsets.
Yeah. Like I have an Oculus. And so there's Resident Evil 4 on the Oculus, but it's not the remake. It's like the old one.
Okay. My niece got that for Christmas.
Okay.
It came with hers.
Yeah. So it may or may not be exclusive.
It's possible that that's what I'm thinking of. But yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then it's not exclusive. If they're doing it with the remake.
No,
but
it is something new. It's
okay.
either for 8 or the remake. They are doing something like a completely new mode where you can play through the full game. And I think it is probably 4 because it's to play through the full game. So like, but I don't know. I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure. So there is that coming. But again, no other big Sony franchises announced yet. Maybe that they're waiting till after launch, but I could see interest not being quite what they expected for launch.
Give me Sonic 06 on VR.
Yo,
Yes.
dude, the Sonic 06 remake.
I mean, Sonic P06, Project 06 looks phenomenal.
Is that people trying to remake it?
That is people remaking it, and so I don't think they're re-recording the dialogue, but they're fixing all the animation, they're fixing all the glitches. I want to say they have
just the fact that it's all the animation, all the glitches.
Yeah, like
it's the whole game.
Yeah,
The entire plot.
I don't know if they're fixing the plot. I would love to see certain elements of the plot fixed. But
you want to see Sonic kiss the girl more.
Oh my gosh.
A Sonic in VR kind of sounds like it would be a vomit simulator.
Yeah.
It could either be really amazing or really horrible. Like there'd be no in between.
But
I remember when VR first came out, there was some title on the PC for the early VR helmets that had you almost like in a sort of Tony Hawk type situation, but you'd be going sometimes and the game would stutter. And it was the game because lots of people reported this. It wasn't just, like your PC. And apparently it made people very sick because part of what makes you sick is that disconnect between what you're seeing and what you're feeling. And so to have it just suddenly stop like that, like apparently lots of people were like, okay, I'm going to be sick. I've got to get out of this right now. So yes, I think a Sonic game could very well.
with the glitches and that, no, absolutely not. Any Sonic game, it doesn't matter.
Hey, hang on.
just running along and just run right through a
around
wall.
at the speed of sound.
Just clip through the ground.
Oh man.
I'm stuck. I'm stuck in this wall and violently like glitching. You're just throwing up
man.
everywhere.
Oh man. Oh man.
Oh yeah, that's please don't make that Sega.
Yeah. Please, if we're gonna get a Sonic VR, make it one after we kill the boost mechanic.
Make it a Big the Cat fishing VR game.
There you go.
That would work.
The whole reason they made Big the Cat was because they had the fishing extension for the controller.
Yeah, it was a whole controller, a whole
Yeah.
fishing controller for the Dreamcast.
That was the whole reason they made Big the Cat, so why not? Let's go.
I prefer to think that the reason they made the fishing controller is Big the Cat.
It's a chicken and egg type of thing.
Yeah, and then they were like, "Oh, we have to make Sega Bass Fishing and other games."
Oh man. I mean, Big does have the question of if Big and Froggy do have the conversation of if the chicken or the egg came first in Big's song from Sonic Adventure. So
Yeah, there you go. See, they knew what was up.
they did.
All right, Alicia. So this week we got news that finally our first news of the big DC universe reboot. So this is for the films and television shows, but also apparently for the video games. So James Gunn, who has done the Suicide Squad most recent movie and did the Peacemaker television series, also known for doing Guardians of the Galaxy for Marvel. He is now the head of DC's film and television universe, and they announced 10 new projects that they're working on, a new Superman movie, a new Batman movie.
Yep.
One of those, at least, and I can't even think of the name of it now, but one of those I had never heard of before, that they were going to do a movie of.
Oh.
I can't think of the name of it now.
Yeah,
but
I'm trying to remember everything they said they were doing.
it wasn't The Outsiders, but it was some name like that. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I've never heard anyone talk about that. So that's kind of a weird one to decide to lead with as one of your first films. But they were going to do a Swamp Thing. I forgot if that was a movie or a TV show. I think it was a movie. They were talking about doing a new Swamp Thing movie. So anyways, the point being that as part of this announcement, they said all of this is going to be interconnected. All their movies and their TV shows. So if somebody's playing the actor in a TV show, then they will carry over into the movies and play it in the movie. So there won't be different universes like there have been with the Arrow and Flash and other shows. That this will all be integrated. But the thing that was really weird is they said this would also carry over to their video games. And so it's one thing if you get the voice actor to do the video game. It's something else to say the story elements and everything. And there's been a lot of chatter about, does James Gunn know how long it takes to make a video game?
Well, I would think probably that what I think would happen would be that the games would end up being superfluous stories in terms of like they would be standalone and would add more context to things that happen in the movies and in the TV shows.
Like a one-off issue of a comic.
Yeah. Where like it would still be there, and then if you played the game, then you might pick up on references to it and know, oh, they're referencing the game rather than, oh, they're just referencing a thing that we assume happened in this character's life. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I have concerns.
Well, let me first ask you, does this excite you? You're a big comic book fan. Does this excite you, them doing this reboot and what they've announced so far?
Yes and no. I think I'm cautiously hopeful for things. And some of it gets into opinions that are more rants, but one of the things that
tune in for Alicia's separate podcast.
Well, one of the things
Utecht on comics.
it kind of feels like DC hired James Gunn because Marvel did this so well for so long. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, I found both personally and just from conversations with others, like a lot of people are getting kind of burnt out on how interconnected Marvel is, where you can't just watch the movies, you can't just watch the shows.
Right.
And so I worry that this is going to be stretching things even more thin. Like, I think that they really can't win because, when Arrow and Flash and all those started in, 2012, 2013, and Man of Steel was in 2013, and, a week after Flash premiered on TV, then they announced Ezra Miller for the Flash movie, and everyone was like, what the hell? Like,
Right. I remember that happening and being like, that's kind of weird.
And so it's like, they really can't win because when you keep them separate, then everyone's like, well, why aren't the TV shows and the movies connected? But I also think trying to make them too connected just ends up being exhausting. Like, I don't have time to watch everything. I still haven't watched over half of the Disney Plus Marvel shows. I still haven't watched any of the Netflix Marvel shows other than season 1 of Daredevil. And it's like, these are things I want to watch, but 1, I don't have time, and 2, I'm burnt out.
Right.
And so, especially if you start bringing games into it, a film you can sit down and... Some films deserve to be 4 hours, not many. And I think that DC tends to make films longer than they deserve to be. Like, even as much as I was impressed by the Robert Pattinson Batman film, it was half an hour too long. And I think that they'll keep doing that.
Yeah, because wasn't that film like close to 3 hours?
It was like 3 hours and 4 minutes or something like that. And the entire last half hour should have been not in this movie. Should have been something separate. But so you've already got that length for films. You get a TV show, 26 episodes, an hour each episode. That's another 26 hours. And then you get games where you're looking at...
Even if it's a streaming show, though, you're still looking at 9 episodes.
Yeah, you're still looking at a ton of time there. And then you look at games, if they were going to be realistic with wanting people to keep up with it, they would do a little, okay, you can beat this in 3 hours. But I don't see them doing that. I see them wanting to make something like, Marvel Spider-Man games and make just this massive...
Or the Arkham games.
Or the Arkham games, yeah. And it's like, even as someone who has been a lifelong comic book fan and who will never stop being in love with Dick Grayson, I don't have time for this. And I'm exhausted by it. Like, I don't want to spend 60 hours on another Arkham game. I don't want to spend 60 hours on, a Swamp Thing game. I don't care about Swamp Thing.
And I would never, ever, ever buy any Batman game. I don't care how integral it was to the universe. And I know that that's a controversial opinion because Alicia looks like she's about to kill me right now. But I refuse to spend money on anything Batman. So I would, if it was a big Batman game that tied into the universe, I'm just not going to do it.
I mean, that kind of breaks my heart, but...
this is more of a joke than anything, but I kind of hope that, this is, real in the sense that, the next generation will have their version of the convoluted Kingdom Hearts lore, where you need, 3 different streaming services, 5 different consoles, and a Nokia phone from 2012 in order to fully understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it's going to turn out to be. And, every time you think that, okay, we've got 1.5. Well, joke's on you. Now we've got 1.8.
Right.
And just, you know, when you're really into it and you're not exhausted by it, you know, I've played every Kingdom Hearts game. I've done that. There is a time that I see myself doing this for DC, but right now is not that time. Like I need time to cool off before I can come back and be like, let me put, you know, 3 straight weeks into this.
Right. And I think you're absolutely right saying it's too much of a time ask. I think they've hit that point where they're asking too much time of their fans. And this idea that you have to be not just devoted to a fandom, but it has to be your entire life.
Yeah. And I say that as someone whose entire life is fandoms. Like, the 3 of you all came to my show, and I literally, my entire life is fandoms. But I don't have just this one fandom.
Right.
Like, I want to give my attention to a bunch of them.
But Alicia, you do this podcast with us talking about video games each week, but then you go off and you go see a musical on stage.
Oh, don't start me
live.
on Les Miserables right now.
But then you go and you read a book, and then you go and you read a comic, and then you go and watch a movie, and like
it's like you gotta be able to split your time. And even as someone who's, you know, even in my day-to-day life, when I'm teaching, I'm thinking about fandoms. You know,
Right.
when I'm learning something, I literally comprehend the world through fandoms.
Right.
But even then, I don't want to put the amount of time that this kind of interconnectedness would require.
Right.
Yeah.
Into just one thing, right? So you're
Yeah.
consuming all sorts of different types of media, but it's not just all Harry Potter or all Batman. And
Even like right now, Les Miserables is my current obsession, and I'm just on loop with that constantly. But it's not the only thing on loop in my head. You know, do I have One Day More looping in my head right now? Yes. Am I verbalizing and speaking rather than just singing that the entire time? No.
please don't. We'll get copyright striked on it.
Well, mentioning Kingdom Hearts, I thought of something that might make it tolerable. And one of the more recent releases of Kingdom Hearts, one of the game's not even involved in it. It's just the cutscenes from that game.
Yeah, that
And-
was 2.8, I think.
Yeah. And so
The final remix.
Yeah. And so if they did that with one of the games, maybe.
But then just make a movie.
Right. Or like put it on YouTube or something for
Yeah.
people who don't want to play the game. And the game's available for people who do want to play it. But make the cutscenes available if it's going to be integral to the plot.
Yeah, and that's why I'm assuming that, you know, even if James Gunn himself doesn't understand this, whoever is making these games would hopefully understand and be able to say, like, hey, this needs to be something that's more Easter eggs. And, you know, it's like when Marvel first did Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., season 1, you did not need to watch that show at all to still enjoy the movies fully. But if you did watch the show, then the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. Hydra infiltration had a way bigger impact.
But you did need to see the movies to appreciate some of the show.
Yeah,
Like,
you did need to have seen the movies to see the show, but I think that would be the path forward for the games if they want it to be connected to the movies and the TV shows. Is like, okay, you need to be caught up on the movies and the shows in order to play the game, but you don't need to. But playing the game just enhances your experience of this. But yeah, I'm excited and exhausted at the same time.
Well, I mean, you can kind of imagine. So I think what you're saying is, okay, so we're going to do a Superman video game, and God help us, a new Superman video game. But we're going to do a Superman video game, and we're going to take one of the villains and somebody who hasn't appeared in the movies, and we're not planning to include in the movies. So, some what's his name, Mr. Mixpix or whatever.
Oh yeah, I can't say his name.
So we're going to take him. We're probably never going to use him in a movie. We're going to throw him into this game, and it's the same characters and same world and universe. But this is a way for us to like kind of tie into all of that. And so we might reference what happened in a film or something, and it will be the likeness of whoever is the new Superman, the new Lois Lane, but it's not going to be integral because, you know, like...
Or even doing like, you know, if you're looking at Superman, okay, if we're doing a Superman movie, well, then maybe we do a Superboy video game and like give us some of that history that, okay, if you've played the game, it enhances your experience, but also, you know, if he makes a throwaway reference to Smallville, you're not sitting there going, huh? What? Because that could very easily, for the average moviegoer, okay, that's just an Easter egg to the comics.
Can we get a Batman game that shows why he became Batman and what happened to him as a young child that might have traumatized him to become Batman? Can we get a whole game about that?
Just as long as we don't have to hear about Martha. And why did you say that name?
Well, you know, that game will be all about Martha.
I mean, I would be down for, you know, give us a game of, Bruce Wayne going and traveling and training. I would be down for that.
It's going to be NFT blockchain games.
Well, I mean, when you were talking, Alicia, I just can't help but think, like, my brother has watched most of the Marvel movies, and he's got 3 little boys who are very much into that. They're the right age and perfect and everything for it. I don't think he's watched most of the series. He may have watched one of them. But, like, he plays video games sometimes with his kids, and he grew up playing video games with me. He likes video games, but he doesn't play a whole lot now in his life. And I think asking him to add that into his life is a big ask.
Yeah.
And I think there are so many people who don't play video games like this on the regular. You know, they play Jackbox when they're together with friends, that it can't be anything integral or you're completely losing a big chunk of your audience.
Yeah. It's got to be Easter eggs.
Yeah, so
now Batman 64 is going to be a DCU canon.
Oh, man.
Or Superman, did I say Batman?
I'll say
Superman 64.
There were Batman games on the Nintendo 64. So.
Here I thought you were saying they were going to make Batman 64.
Oh, in the style of Superman 64?
In the style of Superman 64.
New Nintendo 64 games in 2023.
With the same fog and everything.
I mean, you got Garbage Pail Kids.
Would it be, it couldn't be Lex Wins, though. It'd have to be like...
You got
Joker
Little
Wins.
Gator game. Little Gator game is definitely like kind of in that style of old N64 games.
It doesn't play like them, though.
No.
It's a tribute to them. It's not really in...
That is very true. A few last stories here. Apple TV will premiere their Tetris film at South by Southwest. So this is one of those things...
How? How do you make a Tetris film?
So this is one of those properties that gets announced and somebody says, we're making a Tetris film. And you go, what? It's like going to be like a Saturday morning cartoon and all the pieces have different personalities. And like they're trying to unite together.
But then when they unite, they vanish. Is it a tragedy film? Is it like...
Maybe they're villains and someone has to smash them together in the correct way and then they disappear.
Is
it James Marsden?
James Marsden hopes. Apparently this will be about the game, the like actual making of the game.
Oh,
and
okay. Okay.
The
guy getting ripped off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So apparently it's going to be that story, the real life
so it's
story.
the story of Tetris, not
Right.
Tetris with a story.
Right.
Adam Sandler.
Which is much less interesting. You know, Adam Sandler already did that movie.
I'll say.
You made a joke, and Adam Sandler had already beat you to the joke.
Adam Sandler beat you to the joke by 11 years.
I'm going to beat myself up in the parking lot.
It's just no matter how low of a joke you can make about Adam Sandler, he's already done it.
He's 10 years ahead of you.
Let's see. We talked about VR earlier. I guess I should put this up there with that story. Meta, or Facebook's VR division, lost $13 billion last year.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. I don't know how they lose $13 billion unless the whole metaverse development stuff is mixed in there with this, and I'm not clear on that. But yeah, this is why you get a price hike on the Oculus Quest. This is why development, it seems to have slowed down considerably with Facebook, with their Quest devices and the games. So yeah, bad times over there. This is probably why John Carmack left Meta. So probably a lot of people eyeing abandoning ship at this point. One last thing, The Last of Us Part 1 on PC has been delayed until March 28th, after the finale of the first season. So we talked about last week, I believe, the spike in sales after the premiere of the show for the PlayStation version. They're not going to get the PC version out in time. I am sure somebody at Sony is furious over this, that this is not going to be out, because they probably wanted this out, the same week as the premiere, so people could buy this. And certainly with as culturally phenomenon as this show has turned out to be.
I will say, though, I could see a positive spin on this for them. And that, like, when the show is done and you have to wait for season 2, well, here's the game on PC to tide you over until season 2.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a way to spin that. And we have not talked at all about the show, and I don't know how much we want to talk about it because of spoilers, but pretty amazing third episode that is really hit a cultural touch point, I think, at this point. That you have sorry, OJ's phone's going off. I don't know if that picked up on the podcast or not. But you just see people talking about it, and it's weird. It's weird in a way because people are talking about this adaptation of a video game in a way that nobody ever talks about adaptations of video games.
No, this is like, as an outsider to both, this is like Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
the way people talk about it.
Yeah,
before the last season.
Yeah, early Game of Thrones.
Yes, very clear. Let's point that out.
Yeah, this is like, as an outside observer, all of this reminds me of how people talked about early Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's been really cool. And that third episode, I know OJ and I talked about watching. I think we had just watched the first 2 episodes for the last episode. Yeah, that would make sense. And so, those first 2 episodes, we talked about some of the deviations. This takes a big deviation from the game. It expands on the story. That story is in there in the game. You just have to do the bare minimum digging, which apparently a lot of people didn't do, because the number of people I've read online who are like, Bill's not gay, where are they getting this from? And you're like, no, it's just there, like very explicitly there.
Yeah. Like very gross there.
Yes, with the magazine. But, that is, they took an element and they took it and they expanded it, and it's cool because this is what the best adaptations do. They're not, they don't have to be literal to the page or the controller in this case. But they take the spirit of it and they expand it. And I think, this did it spectacularly, and I don't want to talk in too much detail because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who might be listening, but just a fantastic show so far. And give Nick Offerman the Emmy. Yeah.
Like, I'm very critical of straight people playing gay characters, but I think Nick Offerman is fantastic and perfect for that role. And I'm not critical at all of him being a gay character.
And it felt like he did I don't know your feelings on this, but when I hear people who are critical on that, it's often because straight people play those gay characters as one-dimensional sometimes, and he really does
a lot of caricatures. And
he really gives it a three-dimensionalness that's not even in the game.
Yeah,
and a sensitivity that you do not see depicted in television or movies that often in romantic relationships. Period. But certainly not in gay relationships.
And he's currently in the show, he's more well developed than the main characters. Like after episode 3, it's really, really interesting to see that happen.
Yeah, because the main characters have had the story kind of split between them and other characters coming in and out, and they basically took one episode and said, "This is Nick Offerman's story."
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fantastic, and good on the producers for taking what I'm sure felt like a risk. We're deviating from the main story, and they executed it in a fantastic fashion. So highest of recommendations for that. All right, that does it for the news. So our big question for this week is, and I couldn't remember, have we done this question before?
I think we have, but I don't think my answer is the same as last time.
Okay, so none of us can remember. So it's a new question, so nobody listening probably can remember. But the question is, which book would you most like to see made into a video game? And Alicia, why don't we start with you?
So I wasn't going to bring this up, but since I did mention that I'm currently obsessed with Les Mis, this is not my idea. I saw it on Pinterest or something like that, where someone was like, they should make a temple run of Les Mis where you get to play as Jean Valjean and it's Javert chasing you. So shout out to that.
Les Mis was not my expectation.
That was not my answer. That one was just, I came across it this morning and then I saw that this was the question. And I was like, okay, this is my current obsession. I have to bring it up. But in all seriousness, I am in shock that they have still not made video games for the Percy Jackson series.
Was there not when the two films came out? Did they never do like a DS game or something?
They did not.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I was just laughing just because of those sorts of shovelware games that all.
Yeah, well,
the DS had so many of them.
The DS and the Wii had so many.
Doesn't it feel like one of those properties that would have gotten a tie-in
totally
video
does.
game?
It totally does. And
is there a Spiderwick Chronicles video game out there
I
somewhere?
think there is. But yeah, I am just utterly shocked that no one has made a video game of this.
Yeah.
And, maybe they will now with the Disney Plus show, but honestly, I would much rather see one that leans into not trying to look hyper-realistic and leans into some creativity with the animation for all of the characters. I would love to see that because really, this could be with the right love and attention, it could be as good as the PlayStation 2 Lord of the Rings games. Not story-wise because no story is as great as Lord of the Rings, but in terms of gameplay and just the amount of fun that you could have with it.
I did like how you had to check yourself there. So the other nerds didn't come for you.
Nothing will ever, even as obsessed as I am with Les Mis right now, nothing will ever be better than Lord of the Rings. But yeah, I would love to see a Percy Jackson video game. I think that would be so much fun.
I'm just shocked that there hasn't been one already, but
me too.
I believe you. Okay, cool. Mario, how about you?
So I honestly have no idea. But so this might be cheating a little bit, but that streamer who I had watched play Rumbleverse has recently been doing. They did a playthrough of Marvel Midnight Suns, and one of the characters that's in there that and there was a game way back when. I think if they were to do similar to the Spider-Man games, but if they were to make a dedicated Blade game, I think that would be so cool. I think that's a character who, like I said, there was one, I think, on the PlayStation 2 for either Blade 1 or Blade 2, or maybe both of them.
I think there's a Blade 1 game.
But, I think that's a cool character. I think it would be a cool game that if they, really spent the time to, flesh out that story. That's a smaller character in terms of, the Marvel lore that I would love to see get fleshed out more in a game.
And you could bring Wesley Snipes back to voicing.
So you have to.
The only way to do it, honestly.
So, yeah, that would be very cool. Do a Blade video game.
Blade, open season on all suckheads. That's the subtitle.
You got to have that scene from the first movie where you're at a rave and, the sprinklers turn on and it's just blood coming down on people. That's such a great scene.
Oh my
That's such a good movie. Everybody wants to give credit to Spider-Man and X-Men for bringing comic book movies back and showing the right way to make them. No, it was Blade. Blade deserves all the credit. All right, OJ.
So I actually just looked it up for a name and found out that there are video games based on this book series. Because it's the Dragonlance book series, which were based off of Dungeons and Dragons anyway. So they were based off of a game. And there's quite a few books in it. And so I was like, oh, I think that would be amazing if they made those into games. And then when I looked at I just saw that they did make a bunch of them, but they were in the early 90s. And I think they're like text-based games. But I think fleshing out the full world of the Dragonlance novels, I think would be really awesome.
Cool. I'm not familiar with those, so.
So I got one. I got one book as a gift when I was younger, and it was just fantastic. And it followed. So there's a set of twins, and one Cameron and Raceland Majer, and Cameron is like a barbarian warrior type person, and Raceland is very like sick scholarly magician type person. And then there's like a lot of stuff that happens between them. And then I think Raceland turns evil at some point, but then I think he turns good again. But
Spoilers.
Yeah, for something that came out in the 80s. I'm sorry.
How dare you spoil a 3-decade-old work?
5.
I was reading.
No.
I was reading a thread on Twitter about the Animorph books.
I love Animorphs.
And it was basically like the Animorph books are apparently like these came along, I feel like, after I was older than the intended audience. So I never read any of these books, but they were just the most insane plot summaries. So it was somebody just going, you need to know what the plot of the Animorphs is. Here's the craziest thing that happens in each one of these books. And they went through the whole book series. And then the author of the book series like quote tweeted it and did the little shrug emoji.
Well, that's because a lot of it was ghost written. But
like, you know, that's an insane book series.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like they travel back in time at some point and like kill Hitler.
They had the most insane covers too.
They had such cool
So
covers.
I did know the covers. I had seen those like in bookstores.
I think we still have the entire over the span of like 3 years, we got every single book from the series, you know, all of the short series that went along with the side stories and all that. I think we still have that collection in my basement.
Yeah, it's something like 40 books.
It is
the main series.
55 books in the main series, I think. And then they had multiple ones that were one-shots, and then I think a handful that were like between 2 and 4 other books.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well,
wait, so is Animorphs your answer, Justin?
no, it's not. I wouldn't even know where.
Yes.
I wouldn't even know where to begin with Animorphs.
Would it be kind of like Altered Beast universe game?
Yes. Just because I would like to see another Altered Beast video game.
Now I want an Animorphs game too.
So I actually thought of two. One's kind of a joke answer. I guess maybe they're both kind of joke answers. I don't know. One was Animal Farm as a farming simulator.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, it's Harvest Moon, but with animals. And you're a
That'd
pig.
be like, remember when Deadpool came out and they like had the things marketing it as as just like it's a chick flick romance
right,
film,
because
like,
it came out at Valentine's
yeah,
Day.
like that would be the kind of farming simulator, Animal Farm.
Hey, I think it would be great. My second answer is my favorite book of all time, The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. And so I'm just thinking like a sort of visual novel type thing where you're having to like make all these choices and your society ranking is going up or down based on if you're making the right choices until the very end where everyone turns against you and you live out your life in melancholy. I just think that's really what made me pick that was that's a fantastic novel. it's the sort of novel you look at and you go, no one can ever adapt that. And then Martin Scorsese made one of the best film adaptations ever that follows that book like to the T, and it's fantastic. And so if he can do that for a film version, I have faith that somebody can do that for a video game version. And so I would love to see someone try it. All right, that does it for this week's show. Remember, if you have any complaints about the defamation against the DC universe committed by Alicia, you are more than welcome to...
excuse you, OJ said he would never buy a Batman game. I think that's more defamation than anything
I've never played the Arkham games, I'm just saying.
No, you right for if you want to talk to me, talk to me about updating your new DualSense controllers wirelessly. Defamation of the DC universe, that's at OJ.
You can meet me in the parking lot.
He'll be waiting there for you while he waits for Ryan.
And if you enjoy racing games, hold the Mario.
Yes, please send Mario any of your bad racing games that you've collected over the years, which is most of them actually when it comes to racing games. Everybody thinks of the great racing games. They forget all the garbage racing games.
So many.
Yeah, there's really quite a lot.
We don't forget.
But
Mario hasn't forgotten.
That's because I'm playing them, unfortunately.
But yeah, so thanks everyone for being here. Thanks Mario for again joining us. Again, we have Game of the Year content up on the website, including Mario's 50 N64 games from last year that he ranks in order, which is there's lots of racing games in there, and you can tell he's progressively getting angrier at each one he plays, which is entertaining. And lots of anger towards the Madden and other football franchises, which I thought was funny. So perfect timing right here, in time for the Super Bowl. So you can read his angry rants about that. You can listen to our Game of the Year podcasts and selections. We also have some posts up just listing those off. And then obviously Carly, OJ, myself also have our top list on there. So check all of that out. That's at salukigames.com. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, stay cool.